Hello, everybody, friends of the planet. Welcome. We are here today with Brad Campbell, who is the president of the Conservation Law Foundation in Boston and an old friend of mine. So, Brad, it's great to be with you this morning.
Thank you for having me.
We're glad to do it. So let's dive into some questions. Our readers are from all over the country, and so they may not be really that familiar with Conservation Law Foundation's work. So tell us about your organization and how did you end up there?
Well, CLF was founded 50 years ago to take on some of the biggest fights and to address some of the most pressing environmental challenges throughout New England. We work at the national level, but our footprint and focus is in New England. And in the biggest battles, we love to say that we don't quit and go home because we are home. Some of the battles that people may be familiar with across the country because they've had some political profile are probably the foundational one for CLF was the battle to clean up Boston Harbor. Filed litigation to force the cleanup of the harbor, which had been really treated as an open sewer for centuries. We were opposed at that point by every level of government, including the US EPA, which is supposed to protect the environment, and yet prevailed against those forces and wound up cleaning up the dirtiest harbor in America. So just to give you a sense of time, that litigation only really wrapped up with all the deliverables that everybody had to do a couple years ago. So it gives you a sense of the scale, not just of the cleanup, but of the time frames that we have to deal with. So today we continue to take on those big battles, but we have a more expanded toolbox, everything from a lot of big case litigation, but also we have an impact investment group, we have a communications group, we have even some grassroots organizers. And I think the biggest distinction over time has really been the extent to which we've had to fill the gap of agencies that both the federal and state level have been disempowered, in some cases as at the federal level by Trump because they're rolling back the rules and reining in enforcement people, but also at the state level across the country we've seen tremendous budget cuts. At my old agency, the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection, the budget's been cut by more than a third since I left. Same in Massachusetts, same in many other states. And you see over time the rate of enforcement of the law, the number of inspections, the number of enforcement action goes down in direct tracking of those budget cuts. And so there's a much bigger gap today for organizations like ours and partner organizations across the country to fill in terms of the environmental cop not being on the beat.
Great. And Brad, I wanted to touch on something you mentioned a little bit earlier in terms of expanding CLF's toolbox to fight our greatest environmental challenges. And so right now we're in this era where our federal government is taking no action on climate change and holding polluters accountable. And CLF is working to hold oil and gas companies like Shell and Exxon accountable for their contribution to climate change. So can you quickly touch a little more about this work and how you're working to achieve this?
It's a great week to talk about it for me because we just this week prevailed against Shell's motion to dismiss our case against a low-lying facility in Providence, Rhode Island. To my knowledge, it's the first climate case against the oil majors that's made it past the motion to dismiss stage where we're actually going to go to discovery, which is going to be very interesting. And these cases, they're really about climate, from our perspective, climate deceit, but also it's where climate deceit really hits home because these oil and gas facilities where we've sued are low-lying. They are, in the case of one facility in Massachusetts, every projection of a Category 1 storm, let alone a Category 5 storm, puts the facility underwater. And yet, even though these facilities handle oil and hazardous substances, nothing has been done to make the facility climate ready. So you have, in the case of our Massachusetts lawsuit, a company like ExxonMobil, whose scientists doing very good science have documented and joined the scientific consensus about climate risk. And yet in managing their own facilities, which are in the heart of Black, brown, and poor communities, they've done nothing to address those risks. This is not only putting their communities, families, and businesses that are neighboring the facility at risk of toxics flowing through their streets and homes, but it also puts at risk a very public investment in the cleanup of Boston Harbor. In one storm, a catastrophic spill could turn back all the progress we've made over decades in that cleanup and undermine the billions the public has spent on that cleanup.
I wondered if you could talk about, Brad, your work on methane gas leaks and pipelines, because I know that's another issue in New England and it's been explosive to say the least.
Well, we've long had an effort to try to identify and force utilities to address pervasive leaks in the natural gas distribution system. We've done that through regulation, and it really highlights how leaky the system is overall. We obviously have tremendous leaks and flaring at the wellhead, where Trump has eliminated EPA requirements that they control methane leaks. If you look at those leaks throughout the system from a climate change perspective, natural gas is not that much better a bargain than coal. It is time to stop regarding natural gas as a bridge fuel. It's time to stop investing in pipes and plants that are based on fossil fuel, and particularly in the Northeast, natural gas. One of the touch points of that is really to eliminate subsidies. And we defeated those proposals in all 6 New England states. And you saw, as soon as the subsidy wasn't there, the support, the financial support for the pipeline went away. It highlights the fact that there are subsidies all along the way, because all of those leaks in the distribution system, the customers are still paying for that gas. If the natural gas companies had to make all the investments they would have to make to do all of those repairs, natural gas wouldn't be competitive with renewables.
So Brad, I want to ask you about something that's iconically New England, which is fishing and fisheries and the ocean. CLF has an incredibly active ocean conservation program, and you're working hard to advocate for strengthening our fisheries laws and for protection of special ocean places like the Northeast Canyons and Seamounts Monument that President Trump recently rolled back in his own way by allowing fishing in that monument. Talk about why monuments and even stronger fisheries regulation could be good for both the environment and for fishermen and fisherwomen in New England.
We have had a long-standing agenda to ensure that New England's fisheries are managed sustainably. Despite that, the cod fishery has been managed to collapse multiple times over, and it remains a struggle to have the science prevail in fisheries councils that are dominated by commercial fishermen looking at short-term interests. But that whole effort is really complicated by climate change, because we have new challenges in ensuring that these populations are resilient to climate change and to fisheries. And one of the important tools we have to establish marine protected areas that aligns really with a 30 by 30 effort to try to set aside 30% of our lands and waters in permanent protection and conservation, so that we can build the resilience and the habitats and the refuges that species need in order to rebound and thrive in a fast-changing environment. Unfortunately, these battles are hard fought. Often, some of the elected officials we rely on most for leadership on climate tend to be more responsive to the short-term interests of commercial fishermen in particular. That's something we have to overcome. We need the leadership of all of our climate advocates in the legislatures, and particularly those in the federal government, to stand behind these monuments. Right now, we're in court, having challenged the Trump rollback of the Northeast Canyons and Seamounts Monument. We'll continue that fight. We should be creating more of these marine protected areas. There's this wonderfully pristine, a cold water coral area that is absolutely magnificent. It's been photo documented by Brian Scarry of National Geographic extensively. You can see pictures on our website. That's really our next target. That should be permanently protected as well.
You're talking about Cash's Ledge?
Yeah, absolutely. Cash's Ledge, and it's our hope that in a different administration, we can get that area protected along with the Northeast Canyons and Seamounts, get it protected with the support of congressional delegation.
And President Trump's decision not to drill for oil and gas along certain coastlines in order to curry favor with voters in states like North Carolina and Florida, I don't think we should put much stock in that. I suspect it will go away if he were reelected. Let's hope that doesn't happen.
I really have to add for all of your viewers and listeners that it's really important that the public not leave these issues to groups like ours, but the importance of public engagement, supporting groups like ours, of course, and similar organizations elsewhere in the country, but also engaging, letting your legislators know that these issues are a priority for you, that they're going to affect your vote. It's enormously important, that level of engagement. So often you'd have legislators calling you and saying, oh, I'm getting killed on this issue and from my constituents, and you'd sort of press a little bit, and when you found out it was maybe 5 or 6 calls from constituents that motivated that legislator to take action on an issue. And your voice really does matter, as much as some of the narrative of the media these days is disempowering. All of you have a voice, and the more you exercise it, the more the work of organizations like ours will be facilitated.
Brad, thanks so much for everything this morning. We really had a great time talking with you. It's nice to see you, and we really admire CLF's work and wish you good luck with all this litigation and all your campaigns in the region.
Thank you.